Hey, good morning, everyone. I want to show you another neat feature about Google Forms that you may or may not be aware of. I know many of you are starting to use Forms regularly for multiple choice quizzes where you can set an answer key and it can self-mark and import the grades automatically. However, you've probably experienced that there are some questions that require what's called a manual review. Even a short answer quiz, the students can write it a bunch of different ways and still be right. And you have to go through that manually and assign credit to it. So what we've typically have done in the past is gone through each one of the students' forms, looked at all those open response questions, evaluated whether they've written the answer correctly, and given them credit or not. So I want to show you a neat little shortcut that I think will make things even easier for you. And for lack of a better term, I just call it consensus grading because that's what we kind of called it in the old days when we did this paper by paper. So first of all, I'm a sixth grade math student, I'm a sixth grade math teacher at feel like a student these days. I've been learning so much about Google, but I'm a sixth grade math teacher at Nessequake, and my students just had to complete a brief questionnaire on finding the area of these compound shapes. So this was like a little 6 question quiz I gave them, and I only gave this to a small section of my students as an extra practice sheet. And so there was a total of 6 questions that they had to do, and they had to find the area and enter their answers. And with math, there are so many different ways that they can enter an answer and still be correct, especially when they have to tack on units like meters or squared meters. And um, even if you don't space it correctly in your answer and you try to key it automatically, you can run into some issues. So here's something that will make things easier for you, I think. So when we go to the actual response part of the Google form, you'll see here that I have a total of 6 students that did this assignment. And then what I would typically do is I'd pull up my first student right here, and she'd fill out her name and her period. And then I'd have to look at each answer, which here she has 106 squared inches, and that would happen to be correct. And I would mark it correct by assigning the point values here and moving on to the next question. So I'm going to show you an easier way to do this, where you can see all of the answers one at a time for everybody and assign credit for everybody that has that variation of an answer. And here's how it works. You go to this middle tab here called question. And here, what Google Forms does is it groups the questions together, including their first name. So I don't need to check their first or last name. So I am going to skip this question, and I'm also going to skip their last name field and their period number. And my first question that they come to is the area of the colored region of their first shape. And I know that answer to be correct at 106 squared inches, but they can write it different ways. So if I go to this first response here, it tells me that there were 2 responses that put it in perfectly, 106 inches with a little 2. And I can now assign credit to everybody that wrote it this way by putting a little check. And I'm going to save it. Then you'll see here, there's a variation here, and this is why you want to manually do this. I have one student that did 106 inches squared, but didn't do a little small superset 2 and did not do a space in between the 106 and the inches, but that's still correct. So I want to give them credit. So we check this. Then I have one student that spelled it out. That's also correct. So I can assign credit for that variation of the answer. And then finally, we get another variation where you have 106 and then a space after the inches and then a 2 after that. And I also miss one up here, as I see too, where there's no spaces at all. So I can quickly give credit to all of these different variations without needing to go through form by form. So now I go to my next question. And the correct answer for this is 13.4 squared meters. So starting at the top, I have a correct answer here. One person wrote it this way, but it's correct. And I don't have to save it right away either. I could save it all at the end. 13.4 meters squared is written perfectly. That's correct. See, somebody here added a 0 after the 4, which is fine. And then I have somebody that spelled it out. So all of these different variations, and here I do have one incorrect response that I have to mark wrong. Go to my third question. Oh, and it prompts me here, if I don't save it, I want to stay on the page and I want to save it. So you do get prompted if you try to exit out without saving. Okay, then I go to my next one. Oop, if I go back here, I think I left this one. Oh, sorry. 8.15 meters squared is not correct. I thought I had skipped that. Okay. And then my number 3 is 107 feet squared, and that is correct. Variation is correct. This one, obviously, 94 square feet is not correct. And then I have one with no spaces. And then I have another one here that's not correct. Save it. Go to the next question. Okay, for this one, it was 322 squared yards. Correct. Also correct. I have one here that's incorrect. That's correct. And that's correct. Save it. And move on. Okay, this was 48 3/4 meters squared, which is the same as 48.75 meters squared. So we're going to give credit. We're going to give credit here and here, spelled out, and one that's not correct. And finally, my last one, 85.5 miles squared or squared miles is correct. Got one student here that was incorrect. Correct. Correct. And correct. And now we're done. I can now go to my Google Classroom, import the grades, send them out, and return them. Or I can also return them all at once if I want. I can go to the individuals, release their scores, email everybody at once, they'll return their scores, send emails, and release, and we're done. So it's a nice little shortcut called consensus scoring. I happen to think it's quicker than going through each one and scrolling up and scrolling down for every particular response. And I hope that this will save you time. Okay, thanks so much. Take care.